Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right into it. Have you ever wondered about the fascinating, highly lucrative, and honestly sometimes shocking journey of our discarded electronics? Every single year, millions of tons of our old gadgets seem to just vanish when we throw them away. But as you probably guessed, they don't actually disappear. They become part of a massive, completely hidden, global ecosystem.
I mean, it's a question we rarely ask ourselves as we toss an old phone or laptop into a recycling bin, right? What actually happens to it? Well, the answer involves a global supply chain filled with incredible technological potential and, as we'll discover today, some really dangerous corporate fraud. The journey of your dead phone is a lot more complex than just a simple trip to the local landfill.
And the stakes here, they are incredibly high. To put this into perspective, in the year 2022 alone, the raw materials sitting completely unrecovered in our global electronic waste were worth a staggering $91 billion. Let that sink in. That's a massive economic opportunity, quite literally sitting in the trash, packed full of precious metals just waiting to be reclaimed.
So, to understand how we are literally throwing away billions of dollars, we first need to look at the sheer scale of the e-waste avalanche we've created.
Driven by super short product life cycles and, let's be honest, our constant desire for the absolute newest technology, the world generated an astonishing 62 million metric tons of e-waste in 2022. Just pause for a second and try to visualize the physical volume of 62 million metric tons. That is a whole lot of discarded smartphones, computers, and household appliances.
And as our demand for the latest tech just keeps growing, this avalanche is projected to skyrocket to 82 million metric tons by the year 2030. That is a steep, dramatic jump in a really short time frame. It's putting immense pressure on waste management systems all over the world.
But this isn't just an eyesore taking up space. Improper disposal releases severe toxins, things like lead, mercury, and cadmium, straight into our soil and water. These toxins pose grave neurological and developmental risks. And tragically, much of this waste ends up in developing nations, where unprotected workers, and sometimes even children, dismantle our toxic trash by hand. They're exposed to poisonous vapors, completely perpetuating a vicious cycle of exploitation.
Okay, let's pivot for a second and look at the legitimate recycling side. This is where state-of-the-art facilities treat all this waste as an incredible urban mine.
Actually reclaiming precious metals like gold, silver, and copper is a highly meticulous, multi-step process. First off, old circuit boards are completely shredded into a fine powder, while a sophisticated dust extraction system captures the haze. Then, a density separator uses a brisk airflow to sort the materials by weight. From there, those separated streams undergo chemical processing to strip away base metals, which leads us to the final refinement.
Now, the chemical magic that happens at the very end is honestly fascinating. After the precious metals are dissolved, the amber solution clears up as the dense gold particles migrate downward. To remove any remaining base metals, a flux is introduced, which triggers an exothermic reaction. This intense burst of heat brings all the impurities known as slag right to the surface so they can be skimmed off. Finally, with a quick oxygen injection, you're left with a vigorous, bubbling stream of pure molten gold, reclaimed from literal tons of waste.
So we absolutely have the technology to do this, right? But here is where our explainer takes a dark, true crime sort of twist, a massive recycling betrayal.
Think about it. When you responsibly hand off a mercury-filled LCD monitor to an American recycling company, you naturally assume it's being handled safely, right? Well, because the U.S. never actually ratified a 1989 treaty called the Basel Convention, federal laws don't directly prohibit the export of hazardous e-waste to developing nations. It is a massive, gaping legal loophole.
To uncover the truth about where this waste was really ending up, a small nonprofit organization called the Basel Action Network, or BAN, decided to take action. They started secretly installing GPS trackers, using software called EarthEye, deep inside old electronics. They would bug these monitors and just drop them off at local recyclers, acting exactly like regular customers so they could follow the digital trail.
And what they discovered about a Seattle-based company called Total Reclaim was completely shocking. You see, Total Reclaim was widely praised. Their founder had even appeared in documentaries, and they were considered BAN's poster child for good, ethical recycling. But the trackers didn't lie. They followed a dropped-off monitor from the loading dock just a few miles away to Seattle's Harbor Island, all the way across the Pacific Ocean and straight into unregulated, highly toxic dumps in Hong Kong. Total Reclaim didn't just quietly export this toxic waste, they actively lied to their customers about it. As Band's founder Jim Puckett put it, the most troubling thing was finding out you're betrayed by an ally. To cover their tracks, Total Reclaim fabricated false documents, basically creating a fake narrative that the GPS trackers must have accidentally fallen out of the monitors and into a bin of export plastics. Because they made material misrepresentations to get money, they weren't just polluting, they were committing federal fraud.
The motive here? Pure, unfiltered greed. By the numbers, absolutely none of this had to happen. Doing the recycling job ethically and properly would have cost the company about $2.5 million. But by cutting corners, lying, and illegally exporting the hazardous waste, the founders took home nearly $8 million each in income. That is, until they were finally caught, charged with conspiracy, and sentenced to 28 months in prison.
As Jim Puckett points out, this isn't just some white-collar financial crime. He states bluntly, pollution, it does harm people. It is a form of murder. When investigators tracked these devices via satellite, they found former farmland completely turned into dumps covered in black sludge from burning electronics. Exposing overseas workers to mercury vapors and toxic materials has lethal, albeit hard to quantify, health consequences. Real people die prematurely because of these pollutants.
So, how do we fix this? While smaller businesses like Friendly Earth are actively trying to recycle ethically here at home, despite the higher costs and the very messy, labor-intensive process of sorting endless cords and circuit boards, we ultimately need a systemic overhaul to stop this crisis right at the source.
We really must shift toward a circular economy, starting at the very beginning, the design phase. By adopting modular device designs that use fewer toxic materials, electronics become infinitely easier to repair and eventually recycle. On top of that, we need to enforce manufacturer take-back programs, and we need to implement strict national recycling regulations, much like those successfully modeled by countries like Japan and South Korea, to ensure our resources are actually reused and our natural environment is conserved.
Which brings us to what you can do today. Because you might be wondering, how do we bridge the gap between these massive global supply chains and your own daily life? What role do we actually play in this whole ecosystem?
While you have the power to act right now, first off, make absolutely sure you only use verified, certified ethical recycling facilities in your area. Look them up. Second, give your old functioning devices a second life through donation or the secondhand market to extend their lifespan. And honestly, most importantly, we all need to critically evaluate our own consumption habits.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. Before you rush out for the latest gadget, ask yourself, do you really need it? The absolute best way to combat this staggering e-waste avalanche and to stop the cycle of offshore pollution and corporate fraud is simply choosing to keep the device you already have just a little bit longer.